So, our last session, I'm hoping everybody got the notes that I sent out afterwards. Principle four of our principle, our five basic principles, is prayer and meditation keep us aligned with the one great power in the universe. And tonight, what I'm going to do is kind of give you a teaser of sorts. Some of you who have gotten the Unity Canada's the Canadian Path newsletter will know that we're going to have a week-long intensive in April, starting the 19th, running Monday to Friday. One of the courses will be Unity Prayer, which is an expansion of this class, 10 hours of instruction and practice and things like that. But I wanted to have a chance to just kind of give you a flavor of what Unity's prayer ministry is like and how it is that we pray differently than many other religions and many other Christian groups. Certainly, this isn't the prayer that I was raised with. The prayer that I was raised with was that there was a lot of beseeching, there was a lot of "I am a sinful worm of the dirt" type of languaging, and you'll find that Unity's prayer technique, Unity's prayer practice, is very much more affirmative, not only in the statement of who we are as beings, but also in what we believe can happen and will happen. And I just hit a wrong button and lost my screen save here. Got to be careful where you click. So, as I said, we're going to gallop through this. I'd like to spend more of the time on the practice of prayer. So, in 1890, so the year after Unity was founded, we have the development of the Society of Silent Help. Now, it was very informal in the beginning. There weren't really a lot of directions around it. For the most part, was Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, our co-founders, bringing people into their home and having specific prayer time. Now, there were a couple things that were happening at the same time. First of all, they made sure that they didn't hold these prayer sessions at the same time that someone might be going to church. Because in the beginning, there was no intention to form a new denomination. The idea was that they had found these principles, they had mastered the principles, they were demonstrating the principles in their own lives and teaching others how to do the same. And the other people, the next generation, were having the same results. So we had sort of this awareness that, well, if we're going to teach people, we need to have a certain amount of organization. Not too strict, but definitely a sense of what it was they were teaching. So by 1891, we actually see in their magazine and published as a separate tract that here is how you do it. You come together as a group for a specific time of prayer. You hold a divine thought in mind as a group. You don't complain or criticize each other, but you hold for the highest for everyone. And I found it really interesting that we're seeing, even as early as the 1900s, we're seeing these groups forming in Canada. So it wasn't just a little group of people in Kansas City, Missouri, which is where the Fillmores were stationed. It was growing over time and space as people got word of it. And I think of, my own journey in Unity. I started in 1984, and a lot of what attracted me to Unity was talking with people at the time. The church I was attending in Hamilton was doing these massive renovations to some property they had bought, and I remember I was lugging cinder blocks and talking with people about their life story and finding out how their prayer life had impacted them in such positive ways that they couldn't have imagined without. And as I talked to people, that kind of opened my heart and mind to the possibility that perhaps what I had been learning as a child wasn't the only path available to me, that perhaps there was another way to pray, that perhaps there was something as simple, I think I might have said this in an earlier class, as just sitting quietly and trusting that God or being or oneness or whatever we call it would understand the thinking in my heart, the feelings of my heart, the pain that was too much to say anything about, the joy that was unspeakable, that I didn't have to worry about all of the words being in the right place. In 1907, Unity started its prayer ministry by telephone. And this was really huge. At the time, some of you may be aware that Kansas City is famous for being the stockyards, that, this was an area where there was a lot of trading going on of livestock and other commodities from the farms in the area. And we were second only to the Kansas City stockyards for use of telephone. And even now, Silent Unity gets somewhere in the neighborhood, assuming it's a calm day, about 5,000 calls a day. When there is a crisis, that number skyrockets. I actually was on grounds on campus the day of the Oklahoma City bombing, if any of you remember that from the late 1990s. And as Pat was saying about, the energy, I was in class when we got the news and we started getting the phone calls. And we knew something was up. You could kind of feel something was happening at a vibrational level. And I have been informed by some folks who worked at Silent Unity that they were actually on the phone with someone on 9/11 as they died. So it's just been this opportunity to use the technologies in ways that we hadn't thought about. What I find kind of ironic and Spirit having a sense of humor is that some ministries who have been very critical of the unity movement and our teachings actually came to us and said, "But we don't agree with you, but would you teach us how to do telephone ministry?" And we've shared that information widely and without, blame, shame, or condemnation. So uh, in the early days, there was a single person. He sat in a rocking chair on Tracy Avenue, out looking over a window, and there was a light that was kept on in that room to remind people that there was always someone praying. There might not have been someone praying on site, but there was always someone praying wherever. There is always an assigned prayer at all times. So even when COVID hit the Kansas City area so heavily, they decided that it wasn't safe for as many workers to be on grounds, what they've done is they've revamped some of this so that there is someone praying at all times on campus and at home. So we've got the continuation of the prayer. It has not ended since 1890. I mean, in a way, it hasn't ended since before then, but certainly it hasn't ended since then. So we've done over 100 years of telephone ministry as well. And then as we move in, as you'll see, into the internet, we get into a point where we're using the internet for prayer. I have an app on my phone that automatically sends a prayer request in and asks for a prayer request back. And it's wonderful not having to find my computer and load it up and all of that stuff. Talk more about that in a moment. In 1914, in December of that year, we changed the name from the Society of Silent Help to just Silent Unity, which is the name that it is known as today. 1929, just before the stock market crashed, the first buildings were open on Unity Farm, which is now Unity Village. And that included the tower and what is now the Unity Worldwide Ministries building. When I was there, it was the education building. It's been repurposed a number of times, but it's a wonderful building to go into because, you think if these walls could talk, having had Myrtle and Charles there, they had offices there. They spent a lot of time praying there and leading services there. So we have this movement of expansion of our prayer ministry from really small groups to the much larger worldwide that we have now. This is from 1926. This gives you a sense of the prayer time. I loved being in school because at 12 o'clock we were guaranteed a prayer break because everything stops at Unity Village at 11 o'clock for prayer. And when I was off, I was staying on grounds while my husband was doing courses. I got a coffee break at 10:30, and then I got a prayer break at 11. And I've missed that since getting back into the real world of, you know, you go to many managers and say, I need a prayer break. Good luck with that. But this was part of the consciousness that was built up. That in the earliest days, you spent 3 years doing filing and letter writing before you were actually allowed to take the phone calls, before you actually got very actively involved in the prayer work. And it's been that foundation that we've built on over the years of many people deeply immersed in their prayer life, not just while they're at work, but in their personal time as well, and bringing that consciousness to our movement. All right, I have something really exciting. I hope I've done this right. If I've done this right, you are about to hear Myrtle Fillmore recite the prayer of faith on the screen.
God is my help in every need. God does my every hunger feed. God walks beside me, guides my way through every moment of the day. I now am wise, I now am true, patient, kind, and loving too. All things I am, can do, and be through Christ the truth that is in me. God is my help, I can't be sick. God is my strength unfailing quick. God is my all, I know no fear. Hence God and love and truth are here. Amen.
So that recording predates 1931.
God is my...
There we go. So I'm skipping some time frame here because not a lot happens. We have the Great Depression, we have World War II. So basically, what happens is the focus is on prayer for the armies, for peace, for the wars to end. This is the time when James Dillon Freeman writes the prayer for protection, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. What we do get, though, in 1946, we get a Silent Unity affiliate opened in England. And come forward a few decades, and we get the new Silent Unity building open to the current building. You can tell how old someone is or how long they've been in Unity if they still refer to it as the new Silent Unity building. By 1994, we had Silent Unity ministries in Germany, New Zealand, Australia, France, Ghana, Great Britain, and Mexico. So we have French, German, Spanish. I think we might have some dialects as well. So not only are we publishing material in other languages, but we're providing instant prayer service in other languages as well. In 1994 also was our first World Day of Prayer. That will be coming up in September. And they had 1 million calls in that year for the first time ever. And then there's been a whole bunch of things that have happened. We've had some changes in leadership. We've had some shifts in our consciousness and how we verbiage our prayers. The underlying principle has remained the same over the 130 years that Silent Unity has been in service to the world. That hasn't changed, and that's one of the things I love is that it does change in how we experience it, how we language things, how we reflect that we are growing in our understanding and knowledge, but that at the core of our beings, we still understand that we are part of the process of prayer, that it isn't something that we do and then we walk away from, but that it's something that we actively engage in at all times. So, what I'd like to share with you for the next half hour or so is Unity's 5-step prayer process. Now, I add 2 steps. These were taught to me when I first came into Unity, and for me, it really works. So this is what I do on a daily basis. Sometimes more than a daily basis, depending on what kind of day I'm having. So I will send you all of these slides that are coming up, so you don't need to take notes. You can just breathe through it and listen to this at a future time if you're someone who needs that tactile for your education, and that's perfect. So the 5 steps are relaxation, concentration, meditation, realization, and appreciation, to which I and others add preparation and action. So preparation is a step that we kind of forget about, but to me it's really important. It's about setting that space for your time of prayer, finding a space where you won't be disturbed, minimizing your distractions, taking care of your physical needs first. You know, when I'm leading a prayer on Sunday, I will tell people have a little wiggle, because if you suddenly get an itch between your shoulder blades, I guarantee that's going to attract your attention quite loudly. and that it's worth it to spend that little bit of time. Go have a little snack, or have a glass of water or something near you. Have a pen and paper nearby, or something that you can write notes down if your intellect starts suddenly remembering all the things that you need to do. This is not about, being like a hermit on a mountainside that doesn't engage in the world. We're engaged in the world, and sometimes in drawing back, all of the things that we've forgotten that we need to do come forward because they've been, pushed to the recesses of our mind. I know for myself, there's been times when I've been grateful that I've got that paper and pen handy, because I've suddenly remembered something very important that I'd forgotten to do, and it's time sensitive or whatever. So take that time, acknowledge. Some of you have heard me use this metaphor before, that we're like a coin. We have a human side, a physical side, we have a spiritual side that we don't really see, and that we try to balance on the edge of that coin and roll on that. And sometimes we wobble one way or the other. When we're in prayer, we'd prefer to be more in our spiritual self, but to acknowledge that we're human beings, that stuff happens, and that our mind likes to go places. And just to be in that space of, okay, this is my time, this is my appointment. I used to, when I was first going into Unity and learning, I used to put a purple dot in my day book so that people didn't know what I was doing, but it was just my reminder that that was my prayer time. It's a bit more established now after all these years. So step one is relaxation. Take the time to quiet yourself. There's been a big debate. Do I have to sit with my feet flat on the floor and my palms up? To me, it's like, what feels comfortable to you? What feels like a space that your body can align with your spirit? And the second point I've got is, I surrender to the greater good, to let go of the outcome. Now, this is one of those things that I've had debates with people about over many years. For me personally, I have found that the less detail I put on my prayers, the more room there is for the prayers to be answered. That if I have said something like, I'm affirming that there is right and perfect employment for me at a wage that respects me, and that I'm surrounded by people who, are fellow travelers on the path, and that I'm doing work that feeds my soul and that allows me to share of my talents and my knowledge. That's a lot different than saying, okay, I want to work for, uh, pick a company at this level with, a $150,000 salary with these benefits. There's no room for spirit to move if you get too tight. Now, you need to have some, you know, you want to co-create this. You want something that, you'll enjoy when it arrives. But by the same token, you don't want to be so constrictive that spirit's like, well, sorry, can't help you. The things aren't coming together for that. Um, the stories told of a minister who saw a pink Cadillac and said, geez, that's a nice looking car. That would be really nice for a ministry. I could put my logo on the side. And when she took it into prayer, she kept seeing a bicycle. She couldn't figure out why a bicycle, and ended up that she took a ministry in the Caribbean. And when she came off the plane onto the tarmac, because of course you don't need those door things because you're not as much in the elements, there was her board of directors with a bicycle for her, because that was the right and perfect transportation for her as a minister in that ministry. So just allowing yourself to let go of those things and just come into a space of peace. And, expectation is a really good thing. Concentration. Here's where you might work on your breathing. You might, do some yoga breathing techniques or other breathing techniques. And you're focusing your attention within rather than without. The idea that there is that part of you, and people debate where it is in your body, and in the end it doesn't really matter, but that space within you, that space where you feel a connection. And I don't really have the words to describe it, but I know when I'm there. I can tell I can feel my blood pressure, calming down. I can feel my breathing slowing. You might choose to use a simple word or affirmation. This is a time to, if you're familiar with it and it's something you like, to use the Om, or to use the phrase I am, which we understand in Unity to be the English translation of our divine self. That's a term that we've acknowledged as meaning that part of us. I invite you to not get it too complex, because your intellect will want to run with it, but just something, I am peace, or even just breathe in peace and breathe out gratitude. Whatever works for you. It's taken me time to figure out what works, and it's taken me time to realize what doesn't work or what no longer works. Some of the practices I did in my early days of Unity no longer serve me, and I've released them with blessings and thanks for where they got me to. So it's not about, okay, you learn the prayer techniques and that's it for the rest of your life. No, it's about finding this pathway for yourself where you feel the connection most strongly. Meditation, this is your time to take an affirmation, to take your prayer request with you, and just to be in that space, to be in that awareness. Someone once described it as being in a blanket of light that just surrounds you and is so cozy, and you just feel so loved and cared for, and know that everything will be okay regardless of what you're going through. And right now, let's face it, let's be humanly honest. There are some scary things that have been happening lately. And just to say, okay, I can let those go. I can just allow myself to be in this space of oneness, of my divinity. And then be still and wait. And just allow that time, just even just allowing yourself to be in this space in silence could do amazing things for your physical body, your mental well-being, your emotional well-being, your spiritual well-being. And again, it doesn't have to be, oh, I've got to sit for 10 minutes or I got to sit for half an hour. Work with it. Allow your body to say what it can tolerate. Allow your mind to have some say in this, not complete control, but just to say, you know what? I think I need more time today. And perhaps if your mind is just like, no, we got to get going, we got to get going. I found that sometimes a shorter prayer gets me going, and then I can sit, do a couple things, and then go back into prayer, half an hour later after I've emptied my brain of all the things that it wants to do and be. Just be still, finding that stillness. Finding that stillness in this time of mass media and social media can be a challenge. That's why I add that first step, that first pre-step of, making the preparations, turning my phone off, turning my computer into sleep mode, taking care of distractions so that when I get to this stage of meditation, I won't have the phone suddenly ring and jar me and I'm up on the ceiling, you know, grabbing at my heart because it's racing because I've just been startled out of this meditative state. Realization. By this we mean this is the time to listen. This is the time to just allow yourself to be totally enfolded in that divinity, in that oneness, in that consciousness of the Christ self within you. And for those of you who might be newer to Unity, we use the term Christ to mean a universal. It's not limited to Jesus. We actually split that up, that we have Jesus, the historical man. We have Jesus Christ, the historical man, expressing the Christ consciousness in ways that had not been seen. And then we have the Christ, which is everyone, equally available, equally accessible. It's a matter of choice of whether or not that's where we want to be. And then Christ Jesus is the term we use to describe Jesus after the resurrection, when he had overcome death and moved into a different space of consciousness that I certainly don't fully understand and I don't pretend to. But I just recognize that the Christ was greater than his human self. So this is the time to listen. And people have said to me, well, what am I listening for? And like to say to you, well, you may be listening for a word, or you may be listening for a feeling in your gut. And I know that sounds counterintuitive. Or you may be listening for a vision. And by that, I don't mean anything fancy necessarily. There was a time I was getting kind of desperate. I had been out of work for what felt like an eternity. I was about to run out of uh, benefits. And I remember going into prayer one day, and all of a sudden, a color of blue came into my mind. And I just kind of noticed it and said, oh, that was interesting. I wonder what that's about. And within a week, someone had called me and said, I had an interview for a job. I've taken a different job. They're still hiring. You might want to call them. They're they really need someone for that position. And I typed up my resume and went with my cover letter, and I walked into the building, and I'm sure my jaw dropped because I walked in and the front foyer of that office complex had that same shade of blue I had seen in my prayer time. So when it came time for my interview, I was quite calm because I felt confident at a number of levels that not only was I humanly qualified, but that I had seen that shade of blue, and it was an odd shade of blue. It wasn't a standard one. It was clearly a uh, specially mixed shade. That if that wasn't my job, it was definitely part of my journey. So even if I didn't get the job, I knew that that was a step I was to go through on my journey. And it really released my stress around the interview. So the realization is that time to just be open and aware. And, it may be that you don't get the awareness right away. I've had conversations with perfect strangers that afterwards I realized was an answer to prayer or something that I needed to know in order to take my next right step. And our fifth step is appreciation or thanksgiving or gratitude or however you want to label it. So give thanks that even though you haven't seen the answers yet, even though the manifestation hasn't shown up yet, that you come out of prayer and there isn't a Ferrari in your driveway, but give thanks that it is coming, that you are trusting that the things are working, that whatever needs to happen is happening in right and perfect timing, not only for you, but for everyone else. The job with the blue walls, I wouldn't have seen it before because I was replacing a person who had retired. And so that job wasn't available a month or two before because she hadn't retired yet. So sometimes it's about that being able to stay in that presence of calm and expectation. And it's about getting your feelings about it and getting the anxiety out of the way and replacing it with gratitude for things as yet unseen. Bless your personal prayer list. Bless the people around you. I have a couple prayer partners, and we will share names, just first ones, and we don't need to know what the situation is. God knows it much better than we do. And just be in that space of gratitude for the people, gratitude that you have the opportunity to hold them in your heart, to hold them in your consciousness. Because as we each raise our own consciousness, we can't help but raise the consciousness of everyone around us. And end with something like, so it is, or amen, something that tells your intellect that you're done, because that really kind of helps to go back into whatever it was you were doing, and give yourself a little bit of time. Don't amen and then jump up and start doing things. Give yourself a little bit of time to just breathe through it and get back in. I remember the very first time I went to Unity Village, I flew, and my husband and I flew, and we got home, and going through the airport on the way home, I looked at him and I said, we are never flying again. I don't care if it takes 2 days. We are driving. I can't cope with this sudden, from being in a peaceful, calm place to the hurricane that is many airports, or were many airports at the time. So too with our prayer time, especially as I used to do when I worked outside the home. I would sneak into a washroom. It was a one staller, so I knew I would be alone, and I would have some prayer time, about 3 to 5 minutes. You can usually get away with that, and I would breathe, as I returned to my desk, because I knew that I had just been in a space and I needed to bring myself back into a slightly different space. Now, after all that, I add action, as do others. This is how I learned it. What if anything needs to be done? This is about putting feet on our prayers, bringing them into activity. Do you need to add to a prayer list, whether it's yours, or I'll sometimes reach out to a friend, one of my prayer partners, and say, "Could you please add this person to your prayer list?" Is there something that's yours to do? I was in prayer one day, not that long ago, and I could not get still. I just A friend of mine's face kept coming to my consciousness, and finally I just said to myself, "Okay, I this is ridiculous." Picked up my phone, I texted her. I said, "You okay? Just thinking about you." And the text came back, and she had a whole bunch of crying emojis, and she said, "I just am having such a rough day today. Can we talk?" So we had a little talk, and I hope she felt better afterwards. And then I went back and finished my prayer work. So it's about, being aware of what is yours to do. And as Charles Fillmore, our co-founder, will tell you, when you're given something to do, you do it. He actually had a series of dreams that told him he needed to be in Kansas City and he needed to do spiritual work. And he actually remembered one morning having the dream and hearing a voice telling him in the dream, "You have a work to do, and this dream has been brought to you to remind you to get going." So this might, be something that to be just aware of in a gentle way. I think perhaps Spirit was getting a little frustrated because it was like the third dream that he got. And also, and so important right now, I'm probably harping a bit, but please listen. Has anything come up in your prayer time that has triggered you, that might need someone else to help you process it? I mean, prayer time is very sacred. All of you is in there. All of the experiences you've had, whether as a baby, as a toddler, as a young child, as a teenager, as a young adult, as an older adult, whatever age you're at, whatever you've gone through, whatever traumas you might have experienced, whatever joys you might have experienced. Sometimes these come up in the weirdest ways. I know since my husband passed, there's been some prayer times I've been like, whoa, where'd that come from? And I've reached out to other people to help me process what's come up. Something that I think we do poorly at times, not everyone, but sometimes we get this idea that because we have a spiritual path, that we don't need outside help, that we don't need counselors, that we don't need therapists. I have great respect for a couple ministers who I listen to their talks weekly, and all of them say, "I saw my therapist this week, and I'm doing good. Having some troubles with this area." And I appreciate that they are so vulnerable in sharing that they have challenges. So if you find yourself in a prayer time, please reach out to someone, especially in these times where, many of us are living alone and may or may not have a bubble, may or may not have a bubble that can support us, in emotional or spiritual ways. So I put that from the bottom of my heart. I really, it bothers me when people suffer and they don't need to, because there's been this idea. I actually broke with a counselor I had been offered because her comment to me was, "Oh, your spiritual life is so good, you don't need me." And I kind of thought, you know what? If I have to explain why I need you, because you think that my spiritual life is greater, I'm not sure this is a good fit. I've since found someone else, and it's working quite nicely. And I'm so grateful that I have that option. Uh, so just action, not only caring for others that you might get a nudge about, but taking care of yourself. They say that you can't serve from an empty vessel. It's all well and good to be praying for everyone else, but if you aren't praying for yourself and with yourself and taking care of the action that you're guided with about yourself, I would submit that your cup's going to get empty fairly quickly. So that's what I have about the 5 steps. So we have the course coming up in April, September 8th, 9th. We will have World Day of Prayer, which most likely will be on YouTube again. I haven't seen anything saying that there's any chance that they'll be able to do it live. But the wonderful thing is, it starts in Australia. So we start in Australia and we work our way around the world, all praying together, all praying in this similar way of affirming our divinity, of affirming that things can and will happen for our good, that we don't get punished, that we can hold the light. I've loved the idea of being a lighthouse to the world, that on World Day of Prayer and every day, that I can be a beacon to the world, even if there isn't anybody around me, that I can hold that beam of knowingness of who and what we are and of the greatness that we have within us in that space. So a few other tricks and tips. Uh, Unity.org, that's our homepage for just about everything. If you go to, there's a tab that says prayer, click on that. It will give you an overview of prayer techniques. And then you can see there's this lighter bar underneath. There's a monthly prayer service. The months are the text of the prayer service, which appears here. It's a PDF Adobe file. And then there's an audio. You can right click and save the link as a PDF or MP3 rather. And they're usually 5 or 6, 7 minutes long. It's basically the text of the prayer that you see printed out with some background music. I love it because that was something I did at work. That part of my coffee break was sitting with my MP3 and my headphones and listening to the service and just getting myself back into a calm space if I was in the midst of a hurricane, which I often was. Also available, the phone number that they're advertising is a little different than I've seen elsewhere, so I'm just giving you what they've put out. Uh, on the right there is the Upray, which is the app that I was talking about earlier that allows you to instantly send a prayer request. There's also some meditations there of differing lengths. And then last year they introduced, or maybe it was the year before, I'm kind of losing track of time here, the Silent Unity Virtual Prayer Vigil. And that's a place that you can go and pray with others. And it's been a wonderful tool for us as we are in this space where we can't go down to campus and be, in the space of Unity Village. All right, at this point, I'm going to turn the recording off